On the southern border of the United States, there is a port that is almost always bathed in sunshine. Winter is hardly ever felt here. However, this is not just your regular quiet beach town, but California's second largest city, home to 1.5 million people who seem to be very fortunate. They can go to Mexico for breakfast and return home by car at lunchtime to swim in the Pacific Ocean. This city is San Diego. And yes, it may look like a resort from a postcard, but if you look beneath the surface, its idyllic image cracks. Where there should be only beaches and surfers, there are hidden tunnels, bunkers, and even cemeteries under the roads. And today, you'll learn who digs tunnels beneath the city and why. Why was a bunker built on the coastal cliff? And why do the roads here run right on top of graves? All this and much more in today's video. What lies beneath San Diego? Look here. It's a road in San Diego, in the Skyline neighborhood. Nothing unusual. But let's take a closer look and see what's hidden beneath its surface. The road consists of several layers. On top is a 0.5-inch slurry seal layer that protects the pavement. Beneath it lies a finishing asphalt layer up to 2.5 inches deep. Then the main asphalt concrete with crushed stone up to 9 inches deep. It carries traffic loads. Below is the crushed stone base with cement or bitumen for stability, which usually can go around 1 foot deep. And things get even more interesting from here. At around the same depth of 1 foot are low voltage lines such as telephone, internet, and fiber optics. Since they are thinner, they are kept at least 1 foot away from power lines so that the currents do not interfere with the signal. Near the cables, at a depth of 1.5 to 2 feet, you can find gas pipes buried in residential areas of San Diego. These are ordinary lines that carry gas to stoves and boilers in houses. At a depth of 3.5 feet are power cables, and slightly deeper, around 4 feet underground, is the city's main water supply system. This depth is perfect for protecting the pipes from the pressure from above and accidental loads. Deeper down, up to 6 feet, runs a network of utility pipes. They collect sewage from households, eateries, and factories, directing it to treatment facilities. The larger the pipe, the deeper it is laid. But that's just the beginning. El Campo Santo Cemetery is also situated 6 feet below ground. You'd think, what could be unusual about that? Every city has cemeteries, but this one is truly different. The thing is that some of its graves are situated now under the streets of Old Town. But how could that happen? Here's the story. The cemetery was founded in 1849 and operated until 1880. During this time, more than 450 people were buried here. And the cohort there is very diverse, from the first inhabitants of San Diego to those executed by court order. By the end of the 19th century, the cemetery was quite large, and San Diego was experiencing rapid growth. The city needed new infrastructure, roads, railways, and transportation routes. However, instead of bypassing the burial sites or relocating the graves, a different approach was taken. In 1889, a horse-drawn tram line was built through El Campo Santo. In 1894, it was expanded, and the railroad tracks literally crossed the graves. It would seem that things couldn't get any worse, but they did. In 1942, these sections of road were simply covered with asphalt. As a result, about 20 people remained buried under San Diego Avenue and the sidewalk. Time passed. In the 1990s, a special radar was used to locate the graves. It would seem that they would be reburied, but this happened only to the remains of official Edward Green. His body was exhumed and relocated. The rest of the graves were marked with small metal signs reading "Burial Site." They are installed directly into the asphalt on the roadway, sidewalks, and parking lots. It is unknown who exactly rests in them. Now, many consider this cemetery to be cursed. People report strange sounds, shadows, and objects moving in this area. Yankee Jim Robinson is especially often mentioned in stories. He was sentenced to death in 1852 for stealing the only boat in San Diego Bay. He was hanged right where the Whaley House now stands. Today, according to urban legends, Whaley House is full of ghosts, and Robinson's spirit roams near the cemetery. These legends have long made El Campo Santo famous. It attracts occultists, tourists, and those who seek thrills. But if that seems strange, what would you say about our next stop? There is a park in San Diego with a cemetery underneath it at a depth of about 6 feet. This is Pioneer Park, a cozy spot in the Mission Hills neighborhood. Just imagine people strolling along the paths, exercising, children playing on the lawn, and hundreds of bodies resting underground. Creepy, isn't it? Calvary Cemetery was founded in 1876. It replaced El Campo Santo, which was already filling up. At the time, the population of San Diego barely reached 3,000. Most of those buried here were Catholics, local residents, patrons, priests. For example, Father Antonio Ubach, a parish priest from Old Town, members of the influential Bandini family who owned the Cosmopolitan Hotel in the city, Charles Walsh, an aviation pioneer who built one of the first airplanes in California, and sailor Jesse Ames, one of the first settlers of San Diego who arrived here in 1820 and later became the head of the city council. But time passed. In the 20th century, the cemetery became desolate. There were almost no burial plaques left. They burned down along with the caretaker's house. The townsfolk began complaining about vandalism. By 1919, it was almost no longer used for burials. It was decided to create a park here so that the place would not scare people away. In 1961, the transformation process started. The cemetery was cleared away and the gravestones were removed. Most of them were moved to Mount Hope Cemetery. The graves were left undisturbed. They were simply rolled under the lawn. There are about 800 graves, although, according to some independent estimates, there may be up to 4,000 bodies there. By 1968, the cemetery had officially become Pioneer Park. Only a few concrete plates on its outskirts remind visitors that this place was once a cemetery. Yet, you can find even older burials in San Diego. They are also located 6 feet underground. It was discovered in 1976. Construction workers were building the residence of the Chancellor of the University of California in San Diego. They were excavating a foundation pit when they suddenly discovered 2 skeletons, one male and one female. The investigation began. It revealed that these were members of the prehistoric La Jolla culture. The skeletons were about 9,500 years old. You can say that these were Paleo-Americans, some of the first people to live on this continent. The remains were well preserved, so much so that scientists were able to determine that the man was about 20 years old. And judging by the marks on his hand, he had been throwing spears all his life. He was probably a hunter. The woman was over 30. Her teeth were literally worn down from constantly chewing the fibers used to weave baskets. Perhaps her hands created the household utensils for the entire settlement. Traces were found in the bone isotopes of both of them, confirming the regular consumption of seafood. So they lived on the coast permanently. They watched the ocean, ate oysters, and caught fish 9,500 years ago. This discovery marked the beginning of a long and vociferous legal battle. On one side were anthropologists demanding to study the remains. On the other were representatives of the La Posta Indian tribes, part of the Kumeyaay Confederation. They believed that the bodies belonged to their ancestors and wanted the bones back for reburial. The tribe invoked the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA. This law protects the cultural heritage of indigenous peoples and requires the return of their remains and artifacts. Scientists, however, claimed that the identity of the skeletons could not be determined, and therefore, the law did not apply. In 2016, The court ruled in favor of the indigenous peoples, and the repatriation took place. The remains were returned to representatives of the La Posta tribe. The reburial was held in a private ceremonial manner. Scientists still hope that someday they will receive permission to extract DNA. But now that decision is up to the tribe. Yes, the find is truly rare. However, a little deeper down, something no less amazing was found. At a depth of 9 feet, there were discovered bones which became the subject of long scientific debates. This occurred in San Diego in 1992. During the widening of a highway, a construction bucket struck something unusual. These were the bones of a mastodon, an ancient relative of the elephant. These animals evolved on Earth 35 million years ago. An adult mastodon could weigh up to 6 tons and reach a height of 10 feet. They were the size of a modern elephant, but their appearance was different. Their tusks were longer and more curved, and their teeth were shaped for chewing branches and pine needles. Mastodons tended to live in forests and feed on coarse vegetation. The last of the species died out in America about 10,000 years ago. The remains of one of them were found underground in San Diego. There were more than 300 bone fragments, including tusks, ribs, vertebrae, and teeth. But this find was significantly different from the others. The point is that these bones were shattered. This was not done by a construction bucket, but happened many centuries ago. 5 large stones lay next to the remains, and they looked unusual. They had clear signs of impact, chips, and wear. What does this mean? The bones could have been broken by ancient hominins. Perhaps to get to the animal's bone marrow, they used stones as tools. But when could this have happened? Scientists conducted uranium-thorium dating. It showed that the remains were about 130,700 years old. This means that some of our human ancestors could have been in America long before the officially recognized dates. But in San Diego, even much older burials can be found. It is believed that humans came to America 15 to 20,000 years ago. They crossed Beringia, an ice bridge between Siberia and Alaska. Some studies loosely put the number at up to 26,000. But 130,000 years ago? That's impossible. A debate began in the scientific community. Some believed that the fragmentation of the bones was a coincidence, simply a coincidence of different facts. After all, there is no other evidence that human ancestors were in America 130,000 years ago. No traces of settlements, no remains, skulls, or spears, nothing. The findings from the Cerruti Mastodon site are now in the San Diego Natural History Museum. It is yet another discovery that has raised more questions than answers in the scientific community. Only the ground of San Diego knows the truth, and it hides many more secrets. For example, Rum Runners Cave, which is located at a depth of 15 feet. There are many different rumors about this place, but some things are known for sure. The cave is located in the Sunset Cliffs. The rock is soft sandstone. Waves have shaped these rocks over centuries. As a result, a network of halls and narrow passages was formed, with vertical drops and small puddles at low tide in some places. You can get down either by rope or over dangerous, slippery ledges. At low tide, you can walk here. But once the water rises, you are trapped. There is no official data on the length of the cave, and this is not surprising. It twists and turns, and without equipment, it is simply impossible to pass through it. Rumor has it that in 1920, it was used as a smuggling tunnel to transport alcohol during Prohibition. Boats from Mexico approached the shore, and the cargo was carried into the grotto from the water. The smugglers waited for the tide to cover the entrance and then moved the goods further along underground paths. The cave has long and very narrow passages. You can still see names and symbols scratched on the walls there. Some areas are dark even during the day. Some say that to light their way, The smugglers carved niches for candles in the sandstone. Then they carried boxes of rum and whiskey on their backs. Old-timers even tell of an improvised underground elevator. Supposedly, it lifted cargo up to the houses above the cliffs. But nothing remains of the structure except a buried passageway and legends. Today, Rum Runners Cave is a hotspot for adrenaline junkies, photographers, and tourists. But no one will take you there officially. It is a place where you can easily fall, get stuck, or find yourself cut off from the exit. But there are even more dangerous locations beneath San Diego. For example, a landfill 20 feet underground. It's not talked about much, and it seems as if it doesn't exist. The landfill is located in the southern part of Mission Bay, where South Shores Park now lies. It's a popular leisure spot in San Diego. It's lovely, fun, and noisy, but it can also be dangerous. All because the city's landfill for various types of waste has been operating here since 1952. They dumped everything you can imagine here, from ordinary household waste, paper, glass, food leftovers, to toxic substances. This was waste from large enterprises, aerospace companies, military facilities, industrial plants, and hospitals. It included acids, solvents, heavy metals, and much more. Everything was dumped into unsealed pits and buried in sand. The landfill was in operation for 7 years. In that time, more than 2 million tons of waste were dumped there. However, no serious treatment was carried out. None of these toxins were removed or neutralized. In 1959, the local authorities decided that the landfill should not be located next to the park, so they simply covered the landfill with soil. The city administration and developers remained silent about the toxic history of this place. But the problem did not disappear. In the 1980s, construction of a large resort and hotel commenced in the area. And then it became clear that a real-time bomb lurked beneath the surface of the earth. When the equipment began digging the ground to pour the foundation, the workers smelled a sharp odor of hydrogen sulfide. Some of them experienced symptoms of poisoning. One of the workers was even hospitalized after exposure to the toxic gases. The exploration revealed something terrible. At a depth of 20 feet, directly beneath the planned hotel, lay tens of thousands of barrels of toxic chemicals. These substances seep into the groundwater and the atmosphere, threatening human health and environmental safety. The construction of the new resort was canceled. Since then, the site has been carefully monitored, with soil and water samples taken several times a year. Officials say the situation is under control, but the area around Mission Bay cannot be called safe. Scary? Well, there are other ominous traces of the past buried underground here. 20 feet below the city lies a World War II bunker. It was built to defend the coast in 1943. Inside are concrete passageways, crew quarters, ventilation shafts, and observation and communication posts. Why was it built here? After the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the government decided to play it safe. Everyone was frightened by the thought that Japanese ships might suddenly appear near the U.S. coast. San Diego was a strategic location at the time. Navy warships were based there, and no one wanted to lose this port. Therefore, it was decided to create an underground shelter. Point Loma proved to be the best location for defense. It lies at the mouth of San Diego Bay. The bunker was built on a hill. A concrete command post was constructed there. The height provided a tactical advantage. This spot offers an excellent view of the ocean, coastal areas, and the harbor. If anyone wanted to approach the shores, they would be spotted immediately. The bunker was a 2-story concrete building. On the upper level was a command post with altazimuth telescopes that enabled pinpointing targets on the horizon and transmitting their coordinates to artillery crews. They functioned similarly to a rangefinder in a sniper rifle, but on an oceanic scale. the Ashburn Battery, equipped with two 16-inch guns with a range of nearly 30 miles, was also located there. The lower level was the base end station, where soldiers calculated the course and speed of the target. Inside, there were metal stairs, narrow passageways, a cabin with bunks, rations, and maps. Even a diagram of Japanese ship silhouettes remained. Up to 12 soldiers could be accommodated here, taking turns on duty and resting on beds. The bunker was covered with nets at the top. The dome itself was disguised as a rock so that it looked like part of a cliff from the sea. It never fired a single shot at the enemy. There were no real attacks, but training alerts were regular. After the war, the bunker was simply mothballed. Today, this place is open to tourists a couple of times a month. There, they show how the telescopes rotated and the synchronization bell rang. It sounded every 20 seconds. This was done so that crews in different parts of the bunker would work in sync and not lose their rhythm. But it's not just military facilities that are located so deep underground in San Diego. Further down, at a depth of 45 feet, a time portal was found, showing what it was like here 2 million years ago. In March 2021, workers were digging a foundation pit for a new development in the East Village neighborhood. Suddenly, the excavator's bucket hit a dense layer of rock that looked like concrete. The construction workers decided to break through it. They started working with hammers, picking at it, and spraying it with water from a hose. The rock cracked, and shells spilled out from it like coins from a slot machine in Las Vegas. Usually, such finds cause panic among developers. Often, they are not even reported. Why? Such discoveries often entail a halt in work, the arrival of archaeologists, lengthy research, and delays in construction for months or even years. However, this time, things turned out differently. Upon discovering the shells, the workers immediately contacted the San Diego Natural History Museum. The head of the paleontology department arrived at the site with a team. They examined the find and were amazed. The shells were more than 2 million years old. The fossils included oysters, clams, snails, and sea acorns from the Pliocene and Pleistocene epochs. There were also fragments of sandstone that sealed them in millions of years ago. But why were the shells found deep underground in East Village? It turned out that the site of the neighborhood's noisy streets and high-rise buildings was once an estuary. This was a shallow part of the ancient San Diego Bay, into which streams flowed. Interestingly, the shells were not lying as they would in nature, but chaotically and on their sides. This means they were washed away from their habitat by heavy rain or flooding. The shells are now stored in the San Diego Museum's collection, which already has about 1.5 million specimens. Some of the fossils were given to elementary schools so that children could break the stones themselves and find ancient treasures. Yes, San Diego preserves layers of history under its streets. And then there are also modern, sophisticated projects built here, such as the Courthouse Commons Tunnel. It is located at a depth of 60 feet, and it is not intended for cars or trains. It is not even a terminal for unloading cargo. This tunnel is used to transport prisoners. They are taken between the downtown San Diego Central Jail and the San Diego Superior Court building. Yes, it's like a scene from a movie about the Alcatraz escape, but it's actually part of a new security system. This 3-story underground tunnel was built in 2022. It is 328 feet long and 23 feet wide. The total cost was $83 million. An interesting fact is that the construction took place in a geological trap. The reason is that the tunnel passes through an active geological fault. What does that mean? Imagine a large crack underground that sometimes moves. So the concrete shell was made with an 18-inch offset allowance. This means that the structure can withstand earthquakes. There were other challenges during construction. The underground rock in this area is a loose mixture of sand, clay, and stones. Therefore, the SEM method was used, where the earth is removed in portions and the walls are immediately reinforced on top. It was also necessary to lower the groundwater level. Otherwise, the tunnel would have been constantly flooded. However, these were minor issues compared to the main problem. The work was carried out under Union Street in the very center of the city, under houses and roads. There was only 6 feet of clearance between the tunnel and the foundations of some buildings. That is very little. The buildings could sink and turn into giant houses of cards. Therefore, technologies such as pipe canopies and pipe piles were used. Roughly speaking, they dug a tunnel, inserted supports, and then excavated further. But why all that? Does the old way of transporting inmates in cars no longer work? In fact, it's all for safety and efficiency. Transporting inmates through city streets is a big risk. Traffic jams, attacks, escapes, journalists with cameras. Now imagine you have an underground corridor where no paparazzi can get to. No more convoys, no more stopping traffic, no more fear that someone will escape or someone will be attacked. Everything is under control and on time. This underground passage solved the problem of guarding prisoners. The next place at the same level was built for the convenience of thousands of students and teachers. At a depth of 60 feet underground in San Diego is the only underground station in the San Diego Trolley system. It is located directly beneath the SDSU campus. The other stations are above ground or on elevated tracks. The reason for this is simple. The climate and flat terrain make it possible to lay the lines without tunnels. Plus, San Diego is very large in area, and dense development is only found in the center. This means there is plenty of space to build tram lines. In such a situation, underground construction is considered unreasonably expensive and difficult. But with the SDSU station, the situation was different. It was built in 2005 to connect the campus with the Mission Valley area, where the Snapdragon Stadium was located. Initially, they wanted to run the line near the university, but the university administration was against it. They insisted that the tram run right through the center of the campus. This required the construction of a tunnel. The project was estimated to cost $40 to $50 million, which seemed too pricey. Then they decided to buy up the surrounding land to build the tram line on it. But the land in that area turned out to be way more expensive, so the idea of a tunnel didn't seem so unrealistic anymore. The underground station project was approved. In the end, it cost $103 million, more than twice as much as expected. Construction began in 1999. Did it disturb the students? Partly it did. Therefore, work was deliberately suspended during the first weeks of each semester and during exam periods. This was done in order not to distract students during their busiest times. The opening took place on July 10, 2005. On June 29, 2011, the station was dedicated to Leon Williams, an SDSU graduate and chairman of the city's transportation agency. He pushed hard for this station to be built on campus. But the following facilities are located even deeper underground, and efforts are being made to thoroughly conceal them. Why? In the Otay Mesa border area, near the Mexican city of Tijuana, there is a network of passages more than 70 feet underground. These are not natural formations, drainage channels, or military structures, but elaborate tunnels built by cartels. The stories surrounding these secret tunnels resemble the plots of movies about the mafia. But no, all these things are happening in real life. Beneath San Diego lies the longest smuggling tunnel on the southwest border of the United States. In 2019, Mexican law enforcement officers found the entrance to the tunnel under an industrial building in Tijuana. They then passed the information on to the Americans. Investigators from San Diego began their inquiry, and in 2020 came across the underground passage. What they saw shocked everyone. The tunnel stretched for 4,068 feet from the Mexican border, and its total length was 4,309 feet. It was about 5.5 feet high and 2 feet wide. Inside it, there was an entire infrastructure, ventilation, electrical cables, a drainage system, a rail trolley system, and even an elevator. The main passage ended inside the Otay Mesa warehouses, near hundreds of sandbags blocking the exit. This tunnel is not unique. Otay Mesa remains a hotspot. Since 1993, more than 180 similar tunnels have been discovered on the southwest border. These passages were built by the Sinaloa Cartel. They laid tunnels under the cities of Tijuana and Otay Mesa, complete with ventilation, lighting, and rails. But how do cartels build such gigantic underground structures? They hire engineers, miners, and heavy equipment for construction. Tunnels are dug using buckets of soil, compasses for navigation, and drilling machines. The organization is no worse than that in the construction companies. There are finance specialists, designers, and people who monitor the quality of work. The cartels even consult with leading engineers to make sure everything is done right. The cost of laying such tunnels is estimated at more than $3 million. The leader of the Sinaloa cartel, El Chapo, personally oversaw such projects, and his successor, Lord of the Tunnels Jose Sanchez Villalobos, built at least 2 such passages. What was transported through these tunnels? Many of them are intended for the transportation of large quantities of illegal substances. We are speaking of hundreds of kilograms. Moreover, investigators have already identified a pattern. The tougher the border checks, the deeper the tunnels are dug. But there are also other places with extraordinary history beneath the city. One of them is Sunny Jim C. Cave, located 80 feet underground. This place has an adventurous background. Initially, there was no tunnel here, only a small souvenir shop owned by businessman Gustav Schultz. In 1902, he decided to revive the place. He wanted it to be more than just a mere shop, but a real tourist attraction. To do this, Schultz hired 2 workers to dig a tunnel. It was supposed to start at the shop, which was then his home as well, and lead to the sea caves below. The workers used only shovels and pickaxes. No heavy equipment was used. It took 2 years to dig the tunnel. Can you believe it? 2 people dug such a huge tunnel using only small tools, and they did it so skillfully that it is still in excellent condition. Already in 1905, Schultz began offering tours of his underground route. Originally, the cave was accessed by rope, but later a wooden staircase was built. Today, you can descend 145 steps to reach it. The cave got its name from Frank Baum, author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. He visited this place in March 1905, and the shape of the tunnel entrance reminded him of British Sunny Jim cereal. The name stuck. However, the tunnel also has a dark side. It is rumored that during Prohibition, whiskey was secretly transported through this cave to San Diego. Later, this route was used to smuggle prohibited substances. Over time, the shop and the tunnel fell into disrepair, and in 1994, they were bought out. The profits used to come mainly from the sale of shells, but now the focus has shifted to selling tours. Cave Store offers 15 to 20-minute descents into the cave through the old tunnel. Sometimes you can hear California sea lions barking from inside. But that's not the end of it. There is another tunnel under San Diego located 90 feet underground. To put that into perspective, it is about the length of a 9-story building. And this tunnel is located under a residential building. But who could have dug such a deep underground passage? Could it be another trick of a cartel? Or a sophisticated tourist attraction? But the building, like the tunnel itself, belonged to physicist Glenn Havens. And this underground route was not meant for scientific experiments. The reason was much more prosaic. The Cold War had been underway since the 1950s. The people in the US lived in a state of permanent anxiety. Schools and businesses held drills. People were taught how to put on gas masks and what to do in case of a bombing. But the threat of nuclear war was the most frightening of all. As a professional physicist, Glenn understood better than most what the consequences could be. So he and his family began digging a real underground facility. Work began in 1949, and over the course of 10 years, the Havens dug a system of tunnels and rooms. with a total area of about 2,000 square feet with corridors and halls. Some sections could only be accessed by crawling or sliding down a sandy slope from a height of 2 stories. Some of the tunnel rooms could easily accommodate several dozen people. One of the rooms even had a real play area. They even supplied electricity underground. There was a refrigerator, table tennis, and a supply of drinks. This place became both a family refuge and an unusual leisure zone. Here, children played hide and seek, had parties, and welcomed guests. In 1960, it was even the venue for the Haven's sister's wedding. Today, the house is owned by other people who rarely go down into the tunnel. Most of the city's residents have never seen Haven's Cave with their own eyes. For them, stories about these underground tunnels sound more like urban legends. But even 90 feet is not the limit for San Diego. There are old mines that go down to a depth of 125 feet. They were built in 1971 by George V. King and his partners. The location was perfect. Quartz veins containing gold lay on the slopes of Chariot Canyon, and for many years it was a truly profitable place. The workers here earned relatively little, $4 to $5 a day, but there was plenty of work. A total of about 22,000 ounces of gold were mined here. However, it should be noted that most of this was mined in the 19th century. By the 20th century, the mine had rapidly depleted. From 1900 to 1950, only about 1,500 ounces were obtained. This is less than 1% of the total production of the entire history of the mine. It was no longer profitable to continue active mining. However, small-scale operations continued until 2002 when a forest fire broke out. The fire completely destroyed the mine buildings, and its operations ceased forever. For many years, the mine languished unsold. Initially, it was listed for $250,000. In 2014, a group of investors purchased the mining facility for only $150,000. But if you think that investors immediately started mining gold after acquiring the mine, that's not the case. The fact is that the entire underground facility was flooded. What's more, part of the mine collapsed in a fire, blocking the way to the underground. It will take a lot of money and time to fix all this. But the investors are not discouraged. They say that even if gold mining does not pay off, it is an ideal place to shelter endangered desert tortoises. Today, these tunnels are the deepest point beneath San Diego. Perhaps one day the miners will return and revive the hum of jackhammers. But maybe this underground world will remain hidden from humans forever.